We are again continuing our Shravana Utsav, and on this very special occasion of Sri Radharani, we have His Grace Devakinandan Prabhuji again with us. You all have heard from him, and it was such a wonderful lecture. And everyone, actually, after the lecture, they came back to me and they sent me messages that we want to hear from Devakinandan Prabhuji again. So that is why we have invited once again His Grace Devakinandan Prabhuji on this special day of Sri Radharani. So let's welcome Prabhuji by loudly chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And remember, Prabhuji is sitting in Singapore, so we have to actually make sure that he can hear there. Okay, let's try that out. Hare
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Over to you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Amrish Prabhu, if at any point of time you think, there's something wrong with the reception in terms of audio or visual, just stop me. There's no problems. I mean, we are very informal here.
Yes. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Okay. So thank you very much for having me over and giving me an opportunity to have all your Sangha again for Radharani. It was really a surprise that I could get a chance again to meet all of you so quickly. Very kind of you. And it's so nice that there must be a gathering of devotees there with Ambrish Maharaj Prabhu. And then I see all the other devotees around. But I understand there's some kind of lockdown in New Zealand. So despite all that, somehow you're managing to do this. So that's very nice. So today we'll spend some time, not too long, but some time to try and remember Srimati Radharani. There's so much about Srimati Radharani that we should know. But what I think is very important is to first of all understand Srimati Radharani's feature, who she is, why she's so important to us. It's very important to understand her in the right context. The other interesting thing about Srimati Radharani is that there is only one occasion in Srimad Bhagavatam, one shloka in all Bhagavatam, which even alludes to Srimati Radharani. She appears to be hidden in Srimad Bhagavatam. And there's a reason for that too. But that one verse, that describes her is actually sufficient for us to know everything about her. And the other point I think that's very important is to also hear some sweet pastimes of Srimati Radharani, particularly her appearance, and to also show how closely connected she is to Krishna and how wonderfully, Krishna is devoted to her. Something that is so amazing because the whole world is attracted to Krishna, but Srila Prabhupada says Krishna is attracted to Srimati Radharani. So who is this Srimati Radharani? It's such an amazing point. And maybe the last point that we can share together today will be, what can we learn from Srimati Radharani? I think that is very important for our devotional service. It's so important when we discuss such confidential topics of Srimati Radharani and Krishna, that we should not be in the sky. We should be on the ground. Being in the sky means, that we will be very esoteric about it, but it will lead to more offensive thinking. But being on the ground will be very safe. Srila Prabhupada always kept us on the ground. So we should always also be on the ground. This is very important. I thought it would be nice, just for a minute to sing this very beautiful bhajan from Rupa Goswami, who actually describes Srimati Radharani so nicely. So just bear with me as an invocation that we will chant, Radharani's beautiful shloka. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Dhaite. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Dhaite. Gokula Taruni Mandala Mahite. Gokula Taruni Mandala Mahite. Damodar Rati Vardhana Veshe. Damodar Rati Vardhana Veshe. Harineshkuta Vrinda Vipineshe. Harineshkuta Vrinda Vipineshe Damodar Rati Vardhana Veshe Damodar Rati Vardhana Veshe Harinesh Kuta Vrinda Vipineshe Radhe Jaya Jaya Radhe Jaya Jaya Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhavadhaite Gokula Taruni Mandalamahite Vrishabhanu Dhadhi Navasashileke Vrishabhanu Dhadhi Navasashileke Lalita Sakhi Guna Ramita Vishake Lalita Sakhi Guna Ramita Vishake Vrishabhanu Dhadi Navasashileke Vrishabhanu Dhadi Navasashileke Lalita Sakhi Guna Ramita Vishake Radhe Jaya Jaya Radhe Jaya Jaya Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhavadhaite Gokula Taruni Mandalamahite Karunam Kurumai Karuna Bharite Karunam Kurumai Karuna Bharite Sanaka Sanatana Varani Charite Sanaka Sanatana Varani Charite Karunam Kurumai Karuna Bharite Karunam Kurumai Karuna Bharite Sanaka Sanatana Varani Charite Radhe Jaya Jaya Radhe Jaya Jaya Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhavadhaite Gokula Taruni Mandalamahite Gokula Taruni Mandalamahite. So this is a beautiful bhajan, and this is sung by Rupa Goswami. And in this bhajan, the whole understanding of Srimati Radharani is actually given so nicely. It is stated here, Srila Prabhupada gave a lecture actually on this particular bhajan. And in the lecture, Srila Prabhupada so nicely said that in order to understand Radha and Krishna, we have to understand Radha through Krishna. And the best way to understand Radharani through Krishna is to understand that she is always dear to Krishna, right? That's why it is known as Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Dhaite. Radhe is very, very dear to Krishna. And this is very important point for us to understand. Srila Prabhupada says that Srimati Radharani is the most excellent worshipper of Krishna. That is how in one line, Srila Prabhupada has described Radharani. She is the most excellent worshipper of Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada went on to describe Radharani as the best devotee of Krishna. So if we think, that we are good devotees, then the gold standard for us is actually Srimati Radharani. She is the best devotee. And why? Srila Prabhupada says, because she renders pure devotional service to Krishna. And what is the definition of pure devotional service? Ahaituki apratihata. That is the definition of pure devotional service. Savai pumsam paro dharmo yathor bhakti radoksaje ahaituki apratihata yayatma suprasidati. The only way in this world that the Atma, all of us, we all have Atmas, we are Atmas. The only way, Prabhus and Matajis, we can become satisfied, Bhagavatam tells us, is if we render devotional service as the supreme activity in our life. For Srimati Radharani, devotional service to Krishna is the supreme and sole activity of her life. It is her life and it is her soul. This is very important. And how does she perform the devotional service? This is the takeaway for us. She performs it on 2 stands. Ahaituki. In other words, she performs devotional service without any motive. Srimati Radharani's motive is only to please Krishna. If there is any possibility that she can please Krishna, she will do it. The gopis who follow her and who are her best friends, because of Radharani's association, the gopis have the same mood. All they want to do is serve Krishna. That's all. They don't want anything else. That is why the gopis, even in Bhagavatam, you find that in so many prayers they chant, they always say how much they just want to put Krishna in the center. They don't want to put anybody else in the center. For them, Krishna being in the center is enough. That is all. In fact, in Bhagavatam, it is known as Tapta Jivanam. That is what the gopis say. Tapta Jivanam. In other words, Krishna is the life and soul of the devotees. Very important. And the gopis with Srimati Radharani, in 10:31:1 of Srimad Bhagavatam, they sing very nicely this mood of pure devotional service. Jayati te dikam janmana vraja shrayata indira shashwadatrahi dayita drishyatam dikshutavakas twaidrita savas tvam vichinvate. Such a beautiful shloka. It's the first shloka that they ever chant after they are separated from Krishna. But hear what they say. They say, Krishna, this land of Vrindavan is very nice, but it is extra nice and exceedingly glorious because you have taken birth in it and because you are present here. This is the mood of Srimati Radharani, that wherever Krishna is present, that place, that atmosphere, that circumstance becomes glorious. And that is how we should live our lives. We know in material world, we have so many challenges, and each one of you, your challenge is unique. Nobody can say that I'm suffering more than you. Because if I say I'm suffering more than you, you will write an essay to show me how much you are suffering compared to me. Everyone has their own corners of suffering. But the moment Krishna is in the center, we have full faith that even in that suffering, there is a lesson and Krishna will protect us. That is how Radharani and the gopis live. So that's why they say, even goddess Indira, the goddess of fortune, even she is coming to Vrindavan because you are there. So it is not that goddess of fortune has made Vrindavan glorious or fortunate. As far as Srimati Radharani is concerned, wherever Krishna is, all good fortune is there. And then they say something very important. The gopis say, it is only for your sake, Krishna, that we, your devoted servants, maintain our lives. You know why this is important? The gopis and Srimati Radharani, they consider themselves devoted servants of the Lord. So even though they are in conjugal rasa, even though very often we only think of the gopis as being in that high rasa, even in that conjugal rasa of being with Krishna, they still consider themselves devoted servants. This is the point that our founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada picked up on. And this is something that is unique. In our Sampradaya, even though conjugal love and topmost love is the love that the gopis have for Krishna and Radharani have for Krishna, but their mood even within that rasa is actually that they are always devoted servants of Krishna. This is a very important point. And how do they end that shloka? They say, Krishna, somehow or another, please, we are searching everywhere for you, but somehow or another, please show yourself to us. And this is the second mood of devotional service that's very important. The gopis never claim, we have Krishna. The gopis never claim, Krishna is here with us. The gopis always say, where is Krishna? And that's what Srila Prabhupada told us to worship Radharani also. If we want to learn from Radharani, we must learn to worship Krishna in the mood of separation. The moment we think we have Krishna, what will happen is end of business, end of devotional service. We will think, I've arrived. But when we're always hankering for Krishna, where is Krishna? Where is Krishna? When every day we wait for the association of devotees, where are the devotees? Where are the devotees? That mood will always keep us in devotional service. This is a very important point. So you see, all this is coming from Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite. That's it. Such a in one line of Rupa Goswami, right? Everything about Radharani and how important she is to us is given. Who can give us this wonderful knowledge? Only Srila Prabhupada has given us this. So now Srila Prabhupada goes on to say that in the nectar of instruction, I think it is verse 11, the greatness of Radha is given. In that line, the first line is Krishna syoche pranaya vasati preyashi bhyopi Radha. That line in nectar of instruction, text 11, is the instructive line for us, because it is stated very nicely, of all the great objects which are favorable and delightful, and of all the great gopis in Vrajabhumi, it is Srimati Radharani who is the most treasured object of Krishna's love. So even amidst the great gopis, Srimati Radharani is the greatest object of Krishna's love. This is very important. Always we think of Radharani, always we think that Krishna is the object of Radharani's love. But in Nectar of Instruction, the other way it is expressed. It is stated that the object of Krishna's love is actually Srimati Radharani. It's a very important point. So Srila Prabhupada tells us who is Srimati Radharani. Now we know how glorious Radharani is, but who is Srimati Radharani? And Prabhupada tells us that in order to understand Srimati Radharani, you have to understand that Krishna has a variety of energies. He has multiple manifestations of energies. They are known in the Vedic truth as Parasya Shaktir Vividhaiva Shruyate. He has so many energies. But despite having all these energies, Krishna is not very busy. Prabhupada writes actually and speaks that Krishna is not busy. In fact, na tasya karyam karanam cha vidyate. Even though Krishna is the reason for everything, actually he does nothing personally. Nothing. Prabhupada speaks in a Radhashtami lecture where you will find, he says, actually Krishna in Vrindavan, what is he doing? He's always spending time with the devotees. He's always in sadhu sangha actually, if you think about it. Prabhupada says, some people say that Krishna is very busy killing demons. But Prabhupada says it's the Vasudev feature of Krishna that actually kills demons. The actual Krishnastu Swayam Bhagavan, he doesn't have time to kill demons. He leaves that to his Vasudev feature. And Prabhupada says that actually when he is Krishna, the original form of Krishna, he's just spending time with wonderful devotees in sadhu sangha. And of all the devotees that he spends time with, the devotees that he always hankers to spend time with are the gopis. And of all the gopis, he only wants to spend time chiefly with Srimati Radharani. The gopis are already so exalted. Vrindavan Dham is already so exalted. In fact, you know, remember we did the prayers of Brahma? I think we did it together, right? And in one of the prayers of Brahma, I think it's 10:14:34 of Srimad Bhagavatam, 10:14:34. Brahmaji says something very astonishing. He says that Tad bhuri bhagyam iva janma kim atya atvyam yad gokule katamangri rajo bhishekam yad jivitam nukulitam bhagavan mukundas tyadyapi yad padaraja shruti mridyameva. Brahmaji is praying to Krishna that my greatest fortune would be if I take birth, where? In the forest of Gokula, where my head can actually be bathed by the dust falling from the lotus feet of any of the residents of Vrindavan. This is the mood of Brahma. When Uddhava met the gopis, what did he pray for? He prayed for something similar. He prayed that I must become a dust, I must become a dust or grass, a blade of grass under the feet of these great Vrajabhumi damsels, because I have not learned to love Krishna as they have. When Krishna was asked by Narada Muni one time in Dwarka, Narada said, who amongst all your great devotees is the greatest? And Krishna said, amongst all my devotees, the greatest devotees are the gopis. And so Narada asked, why should they be so important? And Krishna said, you do one experiment. You go and see them and tell them that I'm having headache. Of course, Krishna never has headache. You know, if Krishna has headache, we are finished, isn't it? Krishna is very free. That's why there's no headache. We are never free. That's why we have lots of headache. So Krishna said, you just tell them that my head is not feeling so good today. And the remedy for it is very simple. dust of the lotus feet of devotees, not paracetamol, not Panadol, no, just dust of the lotus feet of the devotees. So, all right, Narada went to everyone. All the devotees were praying that Krishna recovers, but dust they did not want to give. Because they said, if we give dust of lotus of our feet, which is not lotus, and we put it on Krishna's head, we will go to hell. Why do we want to go to hell? So they didn't want to. And so finally Narada came to Vrajabhumi, and there he met the gopis with Srimati Radha. And the moment he asked them, he told them first that Krishna has transcendental headache. And the gopis started swooning. Srimati Radharani immediately asked, what can we do to serve Krishna? And he said, just give us the dust of your lotus feet. And the gopis started dusting their feet like anything. Srimati Radharani, Lalita, Vishaka, they took bags and they started stomping as much as possible around the ground so that they could get as much dust as possible. And Narada was thinking, everybody doesn't want to give. Here there is no abundance of giving. And so he said, aren't you afraid you're going to go to hell? And Srimati Radharani and the gopis, they said something beautiful. They said that if Krishna is not feeling well, that is hell for us. If Krishna is not feeling good, that is hell for us. If Krishna is feeling very happy, that is a heavenly place for us. So it doesn't matter where we are, but it matters how Krishna is feeling. That is ahaituki apratihata. That is pure devotional service. So it's such a beautiful mood. That's why the gopis sing, Tava katha amritam, tapta jivanam, kavibiriditam, kalmasapaham, shravana mangalam, shrimadatatam, bhuvi granantiye, bhuride janaha, atitiyad bhavan, ahnikananam, truti yugayate, tvam apashyatam, kutila kuntalam, shrimukam chate, jada udikshitam, pakshma kridrisham. These two beautiful shlokas, from Gopi Geet are so beautiful. Sometimes I feel the whole class we should just chant verses and say Haribol, because it's so nice, nothing else. What can we say about Krishna? But the gopis say so nicely that Krishna, anytime there is some amrit which is coming from your katha, that is our tapta jivanam. That is the mood of Srimati Radharani, that all she wants is always that Krishna should be happy. And this is something very important for devotees. Srila Prabhupada lived for our happiness. Think about it. He gave his whole life so that all of us who take up Krishna consciousness can be happy. And that is exactly what Srimati Radharani has done. In all her service to Krishna, she is only driven by one point. What can I do in such a way that Krishna is happy? That is why the mood of Radharani is so special. That is what Srila Prabhupada says. So Prabhupada says Krishna has so much energy, but Krishna has nothing to do except take sadhu sangha of all the devotees. But Krishna is always in the enjoying mood. This is very important. If Krishna was not in the enjoying mood, we would never have taken up Krishna consciousness. Why? Because Krishna will not be smiling every day, isn't it? Think about it. Every time you see the deity of Krishna, he's always smiling. Everybody else sometimes can be morose, but Krishna is always smiling. Why? Because the nature of Krishna is Satchit Ananda. He's Anand. He's always deriving pleasure. And of all his energies, the most cherished energy is known as Ladini Sakti. Ladini Sakti is that energy of Krishna that gives pleasure to Krishna. And when Krishna wanted to know what is this great pleasure that I'm deriving from, and what is the great pleasure that devotees who worship me are deriving from, that Shakti that he manifests, that Ladini potency, is Srimati Radharani. This is a very important point. That is the meaning of Srimati Radharani. So Radharani is actually the symbol, right, of the enjoying potency of Krishna. In one lecture, His Holiness J. Advaita Maharaj, he said this very nice point. He said, everyone naturally wants to enjoy. That is true. Yet, one interesting thing you will notice, and this Srila Prabhupada says in his Radhashtami lecture also, he says that nobody wants to enjoy alone. Have you thought about it? That's why you're all here today. That is why there are at least 33 participants on Zoom and many more who are seated there. Nobody wants to enjoy alone. Whenever you sit alone, you find you can't enjoy so well, unless, of course, the person next to you is a great source of trouble, then better become yogi. But if not, then you'll find that you always want to enjoy with everyone. That's why devotees were dancing. I was seeing such ecstatic kirtan. You're all dancing. You're all happy together. And this is not coming from us. This is coming from Krishna. Krishna himself loves to be together. That's why you never see Krishna alone. Never see Krishna alone. So this is a very important point. So therefore, we want to enjoy because that enjoyment is coming from Krishna. It's coming from Krishna. And that's why it's so important for us to be connected to Krishna. The moment we find a connection to Krishna, then only our happiness begins. Krishna declares this, isn't it, in 266 of Bhagavad Gita. Nasti buddhira yuktasya, na cha yuktasya bhavana, na cha bhavayata shantir, ashantasya kutas sukham. Krishna says very nicely, as long as one is not connected to the Supreme, that's Krishna, in Krishna consciousness, two things we will never have. The first, we will not have transcendental intelligence. And second, our mind will always be disturbed. And with a disturbed mind, how can there be peace? And without peace, how can there be happiness? So this pleasure potency, where we are all able to smile and be happy, it's all coming from Srimati Radharani. And when Krishna wants to be happy, he's always with Srimati Radharani. This is a very important point for us to understand. And so therefore, the energy of Krishna is Srimati Radharani. So sometimes people say, is Krishna and Srimati Radharani different? They are different in this sense. If Krishna is fire, Radharani is heat. If Krishna is the sun, Radharani is sunshine. That is how Prabhupada describes her. Prabhupada says, if Krishna is fire, Krishna is the energetic. From the energetic only comes the energy. The energy of fire is manifested as heat. We like fire because fire gives us heat. And if you have fire which doesn't give heat, then logic will tell you that's not really fire, isn't it? Fire means there must be heat. So where there is Krishna, there must be Radha. But one important point Prabhupada says, and this is very important for us, Krishna's potency is that he's always worshipped. Radharani's potency is that she's always worshipping. This is very important. Krishna is worshipped and Radharani is worshipping. That is what she is teaching us, is our relationship with Krishna. Very important. So Srimati Radharani represents the enjoying potency that comes and that is activated only when we are together with Krishna and when we are together with the devotees of Krishna. So this is another take home for us of the significance of Radharani. Do you realize that even though Radharani wanted to spend so much time with Krishna, actually they were hardly alone. They were always with the gopis. The gopis were always serving Radharani and Krishna. It was a big party all the time, a transcendental party. And that's why you're all together. And this is very important for us to remember in Bhagavatam particularly. If you want to know the importance of Sadhu Sangha that Radharani gives us, please remember the 4th canto, 9th chapter, 11th verse. 4, 9, 11 of Srimad Bhagavatam. This is a prayer from Dhruva Maharaj, but it's a very important prayer for us. Bhaktim muhu pravahatam tvayime prasango bhuyat ananta mahatam amalashayanam ye jansha sholbanam uru vyasanam bhavadbhi neshe bhavad gunakatha mritapana. What does Dhruva Maharaj pray? Dhruva Maharaj wanted to become the greatest king there ever was. He wanted to be a ruler greater than his father. But when he took up sincere devotional service, his heart melted. And by the time he saw Krishna in front of him, what was his prayer? His prayer was, "O unlimited Lord, bless me so that I may associate with great devotees who engage in your transcendental loving service constantly." This is a beautiful prayer for Shravan Utsav. This is a prayer that we should keep enshrined in our heart. Our prayer to Krishna and Srimati Radharani. Radharani and Krishna, bless us so that we may always associate with all the great devotees in this congregation, because they are always engaging in transcendental loving service constantly, as the waves of a river constantly flow. Such transcendental devotees, they are special because they are situated in a transcendental stage of life. And Dhruva Maharaj says, by that process of devotional service, I will surely be able to cross over this terrible ocean of material existence. And he says, it will be very easy for me. Why? Because I'm becoming mad to hear about your pastimes because of the association of devotees. So that's why Prabhupada was saying in that lecture, in Radhashtami lecture, he says, supposing I was alone and none of you are in front of me, I will not feel happy, Prabhupada said. Imagine, Srila Prabhupada is saying that. He says, if I'm alone and giving katha, I am not very happy. But because you all are all there, I am very happy. And all the devotees say, Jai Srila Prabhupada. This is Radharani's mercy. This is the pleasure potency of Srimati Radharani. So now you know, she is that important heat that defines fire. So now that we understand that, it's another important point for us to understand. And that is, how does Srimati Radharani, how is she received by us? How should we receive her? We should receive her in the same way Srimad Bhagavatam has received her. This is very important. Why Srimad Bhagavatam? Because Srimad Bhagavatam is Amala Puran. Srimad Bhagavatam is the topmost transcendental literature. And because in Srimad Bhagavatam, everything about Krishna and Krishna consciousness is contained. Dharma projita kaitava atra paramo nirmat saranam satam vedyam vastava atra vastu shivadam tapatrayan moolanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kim va paraishwaraha. This one line, Kim va paraishwaraha. What need is there for any other transcendental literature except Srimad Bhagavatam? So this is how we must understand Srimati Radharani. In the 10th canto, 30th chapter, a glimpse of her glory and her special place in Krishna's heart is given. When Krishna suddenly disappeared, when he was performing his rasa dance with the gopis, what happened? The gopis' minds were fully absorbed in thoughts of him, and they began looking for him in various places. You remember? They looked in the forests everywhere, and they could not find him. But while going deeper and deeper into the forest, something happened. The gopis suddenly saw Krishna's lotus feet, footprints. They saw his footprints. And when they saw his footprints, they realized that his footprints was mixed with another gopi's footprints. In the exact translation, it's stated as another gopi. There's a mystery, yeah? The gopi is not named, but it's another gopi's footprints. How beautiful Bhagavatam approaches Radharani. And then after saying that, the gopis went deeper. They looked and looked, and then they found that definitely this gopi whose feet is mixed in the footprint of Krishna, she must be pleasing him and worshipping him with unusual excellence. That is why Krishna is there actually. She has become so privileged that Krishna is actually with her now. Then further along the path, the gopis came to a place where they no longer saw this gopi's footprint. Suddenly it disappeared. And they only realized then that only Krishna's footprint was there. And now they realize that this wonderful Krishna is carrying this gopi on his shoulder. That's why the footprints disappeared. Otherwise, where the foot? She couldn't have flown somewhere, isn't it? He was carrying her now on his shoulders. And again, the gopis thought, how wonderful this gopi must be. Then now Krishna is carrying her on the shoulder. And then after a little while, they realized there's a change again. Krishna's lotus feet are no longer flat. Only his toes, are touching. And it is near a beautiful rose tree, rose plant. And now the gopis realize, now what is happening? This boy, Krishna, he's carrying the gopi on the shoulder and he's tiptoeing so that he can get beautiful flowers to put garlands and flowers into her hair. How amazing this wonderful gopi must be. And even till now, we don't know who the gopi is. Of course, we all know, that's why we're smiling, isn't it? But Bhagavatam doesn't say it. Shukadev Goswami doesn't want to say it. That's why before all the movies came up with suspense, in Bhagavatam, there's plenty of transcendental suspense. It is not a material concept. It is a transcendental concept. Bhagavatam is everything. And so at that point of time, Radharani, is not described, but we can understand how great she must be. And so because of the special attention that she received from Krishna, that gopi who was with Krishna, Bhagavatam tells us, began to consider herself the most fortunate of women. She didn't have to walk, he carried her. Then he picked up flowers and put it for her. And at that moment when this gopi began to think how fortunate she is, Krishna disappeared. Krishna disappeared even from that gopi. And so what did she do? She was alone now, right? So what is the potency of Krishna? Krishna doesn't like to be alone. So devotees also don't like to be alone. And that gopi quickly came out in the forest to see for Krishna. And she found all her other friends gopis. And together they all looked for Krishna. Such a beautiful, simple and sweet pastime. Now in that pastime, there is a verse, the 10th canto, 30th chapter, 28th verse. And there Shukadev Goswami, who tries very hard not to say the name Radha, but he has to say it because he's also in transcendental ecstasy, remembering Srimati Radharani. So he says, Anaya araditaha, Anaya araditaha nunam, Bhagavan harir ishwaraha, yan no vihaya govindaha, prito yam anayad raha. So it's a very important verse. And the meaning is very nice. In there it is stated, certainly this particular gopi has perfectly worshipped the all-powerful personality of Godhead, Govinda, since he was so pleased with her that he abandoned the rest of us and brought her to a secluded place. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that the word Araditaha is another name for Radharani. That is the name of Radharani in Bhagavatam. And do you know what it means? It has two very important nuances to it. The first word-to-word synonym is perfectly worshipping. So Radharani perfectly worships Krishna. But the second point Prabhupada brings up in his lecture of Araditaha is intense devotional service. This is very important. Sometimes we think why we don't have taste in Krishna consciousness. So many years we are chanting, so many years we are reading. Why is it that we still don't have that taste? Why is it that when Mangalarti comes, we don't jump out of our beds, but we drag ourselves out of bed? Why is it that when we have finished chanting 16 rounds, we say, finally, I finished? Why don't we say, let me chant some more? The only time we are enthusiastic normally is when prasadam is in front of us, but that's okay. Apart from that, it's very difficult sometimes in devotional service. The reason for that is intense devotional service. The more quality we have in our devotional service, the more intense our devotional service will be. So this is a very important point that we must not forget. This intense devotional service that Srimati Radharani gives, that is the reason, Prabhu Mataji's, why Krishna is completely attracted to her. That is why Bhagavatam tells us, in Nectar of Devotion, Krishna is described as Madana Mohana. Even the most beautiful Cupid pales in comparison and becomes attracted to the beauty of Krishna. The whole world is running after the beauty of Krishna actually. But Radharani is Madana Mohana Mohini. She is Madana Mohana Mohini. Therefore, she is so attractive that even Krishna in her presence can become completely distracted by her. Completely distracted. And this is very nice. In some pastimes, if you go to Vrindavan, there's a very nice pastime that's given of Srimati Radharani. One time, Krishna was in a playful mood. So what happened was the gopis were trying to look for him and he went to hide behind one of the trees. So they were in separation from him, looking for him. And at that point of time, what happened was Krishna decided, let me come out in the form of Mahavishnu. And so coming out of the bush, Krishna appeared in the form of Mahavishnu in all raw awe and reverence. When the gopis suddenly saw the four-armed form of Narayana, what did they do? Instead of seeing Krishna, they saw Narayana. So what happened? They lost interest. They thought, no, we are not very interested in Narayana. But then they thought, since Narayana is here, why not use that as an opportunity? So they all went to Narayana and they prayed. And they said, please bestow upon us the benediction that somehow or another we must have eternal association of Krishna. That's it. Everybody turns to Lord Narayana very often, because of his awe and reverence. But the gopis were not interested in that. They were not even dazzled by Narayana. They made their prayer and they left because they say Krishna is not there. However, as they were leaving, the Shastras tell us, as they tried to leave, Srimati Radharani was passing by Mahavishnu, who is Krishna. The moment Krishna took darshan of Srimati Radharani, he had a hard time maintaining his disguise as Mahavishnu. He could not. He kept transforming back to his form of Krishna and then quickly transforming back to his forearm of Vishnu. He became what we would call in English befuddled. Befuddled means I can't control myself. And the reason he could not was because Srimati Radharani's love for him is so great that Krishna becomes completely attracted to her. This is the greatness of the love of Srimati Radharani for Krishna, which is why we have to understand this point. Radha and Krishna cannot be understood from a material point of view. Please remember this. The moment we try to see Srimati Radharani and Krishna from a mundane point of view, we will see them in the same material lenses that we see this world. That's why sometimes people look at Radha and Krishna pictures and they say, who's that girl next to Krishna? And they think that there is a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. So that's because we are seeing Krishna and devotional service from a material lens. But we should understand one thing that Bhagavatam tells us. And this is given very nicely to us in 6:4-29 of Srimad Bhagavatam. So every time we look at Srimati Radharani and Krishna, always chant this shloka. It will help us very much. Yad ya niruktam vachasa nirupitam diyakshabirva manasotayasya ma bhut swarupam gunarupam hitata savai gunapaya visharga lakshanaha. And Daksha is praying to Krishna. And he says, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, 4 things have nothing to do with you. Very nice point. 4 things which are related to our sharir have nothing to do with Krishna. The first is anything that you try to express by material vibrations. Anything that you try to express about Krishna through material vibrations. In other words, you see Krishna from a mundane lens, has nothing to do with Krishna. Anything that you try to ascertain by material intelligence without Shastra has nothing to do with Krishna. Third point, anything that you experience by material senses has nothing to do with Krishna. And anything that you concoct within this material mind has nothing to do with the real nature of Krishna. That is why we must always be guided by the respect that Shukadev Goswami gives to Srimati Radharani. And that is how Srimati Radharani is glorified in Bhagavatam. He does not even address her as Radharani. He addresses the great quality of her. With so much reverence, Shukadev Goswami is approaching her. How much more reverence we must have for Srimati Radharani. It's very important. Prabhupada gave the example, if a cow went into a barn, and in that barn, the barn caught fire. Prabhupada said the fire is reddish in color, and the cow runs out of the barn. Then wherever the cow sees red, right, the cow will think there is fire. You see the point? Second point Prabhupada gave. He gave a very humorous story. One sadhu was sitting down and speaking on Bhagavatam, and this sadhu had long beard and long hair. I think that's why he wants us always to have, shave and not have beard, because of this story. Because there the sadhu had long beard. And when the sadhu was finishing his class on Bhagavatam, he noticed in the audience one elderly lady was having tears coming from her eyes. So sadhu thought, this devotee must be really, very advanced devotee. Tears are coming from her eyes while I speak of Bhagavatam. I'm not crying, but she's crying. So after Bhagavatam, he goes to her and he says, my dear Mata, you must be a very great devotee of the Lord. Please tell us, why you are crying. What is your mood? What were you thinking of as you were actually listening to Bhagavatam? And she said, my dear sir, actually, I was not thinking of Bhagavatam when you were speaking Bhagavatam, but I saw your beard. And I used to have a pet goat, a goat. And my pet goat had a beard which was just like yours, actually. It looked exactly like yours. And my poor pet goat died yesterday. And I'm missing my pet goat very much. And when I sat down for the Bhagavatam and I saw your beard, it reminded me of my pet goat, and therefore I'm crying. And Prabhupada used this story to tell us that this is how we want to see the affairs, the loving transcendental relationship of Radha and Krishna. We will see things with our lenses. Please see Krishna and Radha through the lenses of Srimad Bhagavatam and Shukadev Goswami and Rupa Goswami and Srila Prabhupada. Then we will always be chaste to Srimati Radharani. Not a tinge, of dirt will be in our heart when we approach her. And now to wind down our time together, let us remember the beautiful transcendental appearance of Srimati Radharani. It is stated in the Puranas that Vrishabhanu Maharaj, he was actually coming to the banks of river Yamuna for his midday bath. And when he came to the waters, the sun Surya was high in the sky, but there was a glaring effulgence coming from river Yamuna. He saw a beautiful golden lotus flower, so bright that Surya paled in comparison. So he walked into Yamuna to see what was in that flower. And when he looked between the petals of the flower, there was a beautiful, exquisite baby girl. And she was shining and radiant, looking very, very nice, actually. So he was wondering, who is this beautiful child? And at that moment, Narada Muni, Brahmaji came. And Brahma spoke in a loud voice and said that, Vrishabhanu, you and your wife Kirtida, for many, many lives, you always prayed to become parents of the consort and the energy of Krishna. Today, your prayer has borne fruit. Take this girl back, because she is the Hladini potency of Krishna, and she will bring pleasure to everyone in Gokul, everyone in Vrindavan. She is the only one who will bring pleasure to that Supreme Lord himself. Whereas everyone is seeking pleasure from Krishna, Krishna is seeking pleasure from Radha. So saying, Brahmaji left, and Vrishabhanu happily brought back this little girl and named her Srimati Radharani. The only problem they had was, the girl had two issues, She never opened her eyes and she never spoke anything. So Kirtida became very worried. And at that point of time, they were thinking, should we have any ceremony for her? Should we invite people? What is this happening? And then Narada Muni came. And whenever Narada Muni comes, he transcendently kickstarts everything, isn't it? So he came, and immediately Narada Muni told Kirtida and Vrishabhanu, why are you waiting? Call all the residents of Vrindavan, Gokul, Mathura, have a big program and have a nice ceremony, birth appearance ceremony of the child. And then Narada said, who are you inviting? So then, he gave all the names. And Narada looked through the guest list and insisted that one family must come. Nanda Maharaj must come, and Yashoda Mata must come. And don't forget, when you call parents, also you must invite the children. So Krishna and Balaram must come also. Sometimes you go for programs, they call the parents, but very quietly they wish you don't call the children, right? In this case, no. Narada said everybody should come. So then on that appointed day, Srimati Radharani was put in a beautiful gem-studded cradle, the Puranas tell us. And she looked so beautiful, but she still had not opened her eyes and she had still not spoken. And so what happened was, when Kirtida saw Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda Mata, she was so happy, particularly with Yashoda. But she explained to Yashoda her worry, that something's wrong with my daughter and I'm praying for her. While all that talking was going on, Krishna, whom the Puranas say was about a year old, just past a year. Krishna was crawling and he saw this beautiful cradle. So somehow or another, Krishna being Krishna, he crawled to the cradle and with his hands, he lifted himself up and just with his transcendental face, he looked in. Now the Puranas tell us that the moment Krishna came close to the cradle, this little Srimati Radharani, she could smell the aroma of his lotus feet, the dust that was coming from Krishna. And the moment she smelled that transcendental dust, and she smelled the aroma of tulsi leaves that is always adorning the Lord's lotus feet, Radharani's eyes opened. And the moment she opened her eyes, the first person, and frankly speaking, the only person that Radharani would ever see is Krishna. And that is why she saved her darshan only for the Lord. And this is the most important point we must take away. Srimati Radharani represents chastity in devotional service. You know, in material world, chastity is so important, right? A wife is chaste to husband and husband is chaste to wife. And that is the power and the potency of a relationship. Therefore, in devotional service also, we should always be chaste to Krishna. We should be chaste to bhakti. And we should be chaste to follow devotional service the way Srila Prabhupada has given us. And we should never deviate even an inch from Srila Prabhupada, because Srila Prabhupada is the perfect representative of Srimati Radharani. And all our spiritual masters are all the mercy aspect of Srimati Radharani. Prabhupada says Radharani is not only Hladini potency of Krishna, she is also the compassionate potency of Krishna. Krishna can be hard, Prabhupada says, but Radharani is always soft. So if somebody tries, no matter how fallen that person is, if that person chants Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, if they just chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra with full heart, what will happen? The Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is the supreme potency and mercy of Radharani, because her name is before Krishna. Krishna is there, but Hare is actually Hara, and Hare represents the energy of Srimati Radharani. It's Radharani. So we are chanting Radharani's name before Krishna's name. Very often devotees forget that. They say Hare Krishna, but what about the Hare? Hare is the energy that allows us the mercy, that how we can approach Krishna. So Prabhupada writes and says in his lecture that the moment you chant Krishna's names, you chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, you are actually praying, "Oh Mother Radha, please give us your compassion so that we may approach Father Krishna." What a nice way of putting it. Mother Radha and Father Krishna. And therefore, as children, if we turn to Srimati Radharani, Prabhupada says, even if we are very fallen, Srimati Radharani is at the topmost platform of devotional service. For her, every one of us is equal. No one is above the other. So Radharani will bring anyone. The moment we chant Krishna's names, we pray to her, she will bring us to Krishna. And she will say, "Krishna, this is very nice devotee." Even if we are hopeless 6:30 devotees, she will still say, "Krishna, we are very nice devotee." Who will do that? Nobody in this world will do that. Only Radharani can do that. And that's why Prabhupada tells us we should pray to Srimati Radharani. So when Krishna looked at her, she opened her eyes. And the moment Krishna smiled at her, she opened her mouth and she started chanting. And the moment she started chanting, the first words that came out are the description of Krishna as Govinda, as Govinda. That is why in Stavamala, Rupa Goswami, when he sings this beautiful Radhika Stava, he remembers Radharani in that mood as one who is very dear to Lord, and Lord who is known as Madhav. And Radharani gives pleasure to Govinda, even though Govinda gives pleasure to all living entities. This is the greatness of Srimati Radharani. So this is a beautiful pastime that we can remember of Srimati Radharani. Now, one last point that we should come to the conclusion. And this conclusion is, what can we learn from Srimati Radharani? This is something very important. One of the great things we should learn is that devotional service must be ahaituki. We should not have any motive when we come for the programs, except to please Krishna, except to please Srimati Radharani and serve the devotees. If we come to the program with any other motive, then whatever happens, right, we will never be fully suprasidati. We will not be fully satisfied. And then what happens is we blame the program, we blame devotees, we blame everything and everyone except ourselves. But we don't realize that we have not inspected our own motive. So the more cleaner our motive is, the closer we are to Radharani. Second point to take away is this very important point. Srimati Radharani did not have any material qualification. Nectar of Devotion says she was not educated. She didn't have BSc, MSc, LLB, nothing like that. Never went to university, never went to school for garlanding and anything, but she's expert. She's an expert dancer. She's expert at arranging all services for Krishna. She's expert at fulfilling all the desires of Krishna. That's why she's known as Sarvakanti. She's known as Krishnamai, because from Krishna only, from her only, Krishna is deriving all his attraction. She is known as Parama Devata because she is a supreme goddess and she's worshipable to everyone. She is the full power and Krishna is the possessor of the full power. This is a very important point. And therefore, material qualification is not necessary for devotional service. This is very nicely stated by who? Hanumanji, actually, in the 5th canto of Bhagavatam. Na janmanunam mahato na saubhagam navang na buddhir na krite stesha hetoho tairyad vrishishtan apino vanaukashash chakara sakye batalakshmana grajaha. Hanumanji says, "Oh Lord Ram, you're so kind to me. Despite all my material disqualification, you have still accepted me as your friend. I don't have a house where I can ask you to come, I live in a forest. Each night I live on one tree. I cannot speak proper language because I'm a Vanara. I'm in monkey form. I don't have any education. I don't look very nice either. And despite all my lack of qualification, Chakara Bhatta, you have still accepted me as your friend." This is the mood of Radharani. The gopis were not educated, but they were fully educated in the science of Krishna consciousness. That is very important. And the last takeaway that we should have is that Krishna and Srimati Radharani, they have so mercifully come together in this world today, in Kali Yuga, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is a very important point for us to understand. Radha Krishna Pranaya Vrikrite Ladini Shakti Asmad. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela, chapter 1, text 5, Krishnadas Kaviraj Maharaj declares a secret to us. He says that Srimati Radharani and her loving devotional service to Krishna, they are always a transcendental manifestation in the spiritual sky. But even though Radha and Krishna are eternally one in their identity, and even though they are always separate so that they can enjoy in transcendental pastimes, in Kali Yuga, these two transcendental identities have again united in the form of Sri Krishna Chaitanya. And therefore, when we pray for the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we are actually praying for the mercy of Srimati Radharani. This is a very important point. And so let's end by listening, by just quoting what Srila Prabhupada says when he ends his lecture. He says so nicely in this way. Everything begins with our tongue, Prabhupada says. If you begin service with your tongue, how? Chant Hare Krishna. The tongue has only got two business, Prabhupada says, to articulate sound and to take prasadam. By this process, you will get Srimati Radharani's mercy. Why? Because Hare is there, and all prasadam that you offer, Radharani being the expert transcendental arranger of Krishna's prasad, whatever prasad, bhoga we offer, she adjusts everything to make sure it comes out right. So in both ways, by actually using your tongue, she is giving us mercy. And one last point, don't be in a hurry to see Krishna, Prabhupada says. You cannot see Krishna with material eyes. You cannot hear about him with material ears. You cannot touch him with material touch. Engage your tongue and chant Hare before Krishna. And just like Radharani was always in separation from Krishna, let us always work in such a way that Krishna will see us, not that we want to see Krishna. Jai Srimati Radharani ki. All the assembled Vaishnavas ki. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, our founder Acharya. All glories to Sriman Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the emblem of Srimati Radharani. And all glories to this most wonderful occasion. And all glories to that great transcendental scripture of Srimad Bhagavatam. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhus and Matajis. Happy Radhashtami.
Happy Radharani to you too, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Thank you for this wonderful lecture. And do you still have some time for some questions, Prabhuji?
Sure, Prabhu. I can.
Anyone has any questions, either on Zoom or here locally? You find out if someone is raising hand. Yes. Anyone has question here? So while we are waiting for other questions, Prabhuji, I have one question. So this ahaituki apratihata bhakti is very difficult to do. So from where we are currently at this point in time in our devotional service, how can we actually go towards ahaituki apratihata bhakti? So we know that you mentioned that we have to chant, and in the previous lecture as well we were talking about doing service. But is there anything else that we have to do so that from wherever we are, we can reach that stage of ahaituki apratihata bhakti?
Very nice point, Prabhu. I think the most important way in which we can actually progress towards that stage of ahaituki apratihata is a change in our attitude. That is the most important ingredient for the success of devotional service. In the preface to Nectar of Instruction, Srila Prabhupada writes a very amazing sentence. He says that the success of a devotee in devotional service depends very much on his attitude. So attitude is an internal thing. It is a reflection. And one way to change our attitude is that every time we are ready to come and do service, to be with the devotees, we should just pause for a few moments before we come into a program to really examine our heart and to pray to Srimati Radharani to please give us the strength so that when we come and participate in the program, we should participate to please the devotees. We should never become a source of disturbance to others. We should become a source of pleasure and inspiration to others. We may not be able to execute it because our hearts may have anarthas and unwanted desires, but Krishna is bhava grahi janardana. That means he is the one, who extracts nectar even from a stalk of poison. And Krishna only sees the essence of our devotional mentality. He is not very interested in the result, but he sees our heart. Bali Maharaj in the 8th canto of Bhagavatam, when he was bound, after he could not fulfill his promise of giving 3 steps to Vamandev, what happened? He wanted to pay obeisances to Vamandev when he came before him. But he could not pay obeisances because he was bound and because he was in a very awkward situation. But he paid obeisances in his heart and in his mind. And Bhagavatam tells us that when he did that, the Lord accepted his obeisances as if he had paid obeisances. And in that purport, Amrish Prabhu, Prabhupada writes, the Lord accepted it because he is bhava grahi janardana. He is ready to ignore many things. If Putana, who came and pretended to be a gopi, could actually get the benediction of becoming Dhatri or nurse from Krishna, then how much more when we are trying to be sincere? Krishna will definitely be happy. I remember my Guru Maharaj telling me, when I was young and I started reading Prabhupada's books, I was initially attracted more to how the books looked rather than the content. When you're 13, 14 years old and a book really looks nice, I liked books. When I saw the way these books were made, I thought, wow, this is very nice. So I would carry Bhagavad Gita in my bag, but I would hardly read it actually. So then one day I confessed to my Guru Maharaj, I like the look of the book rather than reading. Maharaj said, don't worry. Even if you're pretending to read, but you like the book, one day Krishna will cheat you and you will end up reading the book and it'll happen anyway. And it happened. So this is the mercy of Krishna and Radharani, but it comes with a little bit of attitude change. I hope that's useful, Amrish Prabhu.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. That was a very wonderful answer and very practical as well, that each one of us, and especially I can implement in my life, to go towards at least a step by step towards that ahaituki apratihata bhakti. Thank you very much. Sudharma Mataji has a question. Okay, Sudharma Mataji, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Thanks for the very nice, very beautiful lecture about Radharani. Prabhuji, my question is, why is the reason why Radharani's name is specifically not mentioned by Shukadeva Goswami in Bhagavatam? Because
Very nice
it
point.
gives a lot of, contemplation by many people. So if he had actually voiced her name, it would have been very easy to,
Actually, you're right. You're right. That is also a question that I ask also. But I think the answer is given in the purport of the verse I quoted, Mataji. In the purport, Prabhupada actually the disciples of Prabhupada who wrote those purports, they quote Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. They quote him to say that actually Shukadeva Goswami, was actually having very little time with Parikshit Maharaj. If he had actually mentioned and stated the name of Srimati Radharani, being a pure devotee who's eternally engaged in the pastimes of Sri Radha and Krishna, he would have become so ecstatic in remembrance of Srimati Radharani that he would not complete Srimad Bhagavatam. And the king had very little time. So instead of looking out for his own pleasure, he decided better I serve the king by finishing Bhagavatam. And that is why he just quoted, he just touched the surface and mentioned her as Araditaha. And even when he mentions her as Araditaha, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, all the acharyas, they have picked it up because you can't hide Srimati Radharani. But Shukadeva Goswami shows us a very important point, that even though we may be very connected to Krishna at the highest possible plane, we should be always aware that actually preaching about Krishna and spreading his glories, that should never become interrupted on account of our ecstasy. That's a very important point. It's a deep and confidential point, but it makes a lot of sense when you are in devotional service. Is that helpful, Mataji?
Yes, Prabhuji. And also they say like in many of the pastimes with Krishna and Radharani, Shukadeva Goswami was present as parrot. Is that right, Prabhuji?
Yes, actually the Shastras tell us that Shukadeva Goswami's manifestation previously also in his spiritual identity is that he's also Shuka, one of the primary parrots who are in the transcendental pastimes of Krishna. So Shukadeva Goswami is so qualified that he has personally witnessed all these pastimes. So when he came to 10th canto, imagine how much sense control he must have had, Mataji, to make sure that he doesn't go completely into the ocean of ecstasy, but stick to the chastity of presenting Bhagavatam so that Parikshit Maharaj would benefit, Suta Goswami would benefit, Guru Parampara would benefit, and you and I today in New Zealand and Singapore can actually benefit. That is devotional service. That is devotional service.
Thank you. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Great. Prabhuji, let us
Unmuted.
I'm unmuted now. Thank you very much, Devakinandan Prabhuji. Before we finish it today, let us give everyone on Zoom also darshan of Shri Radha Shamasundar and all the offerings which have been already done while the lecture was going on.
Amrish Prabhu, I see a hand up, I think yes, Sannivas Prabhu has...
We'll just complete this and then we will go to that last question.
Sure. Thank you, Prabhu. Jai.
Shri Radha Shamasundar ki Jai. Shri Radha Ashtami Festival ki Jai. Hare Krishna. So, Sannivas Prabhuji, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Very, very, very nice expected class, Prabhuji. It was very nice. Prabhuji, in South India, we normally don't hear much name of Radharani. And second thing, in Tirupavai, we hear Goda Devi singing about Gopi Tattva. Like all Tirupavai is about all Gopi Tattva. How to reconcile
Sorry, I couldn't hear you there, Prabhu, the last point.
How to reconcile in South, like I can understand that in Sri Vaishnavas, they also understand Radha Tattva in a very hidden way, but it's not exposed much. Only the people who sadhana bhakti so much, who comes to that part of that end, only they are given that exposure to that Krishna Tattva. So I wanted to understand a deeper, like, but Tripava is completely about Gopi, even though they do Narayan,
Yeah.
but they are about Gopi Tattva, about Krishna.
Yes.
So how to recreate this? But why it's very kept very hidden in South India about Radha's name?
That's a nice point. Geographically speaking, right, practically speaking, different areas of India, parts of Krishna consciousness historically. And you will find that different kinds of rasas were established by the different acharyas according to the different sampradayas. So the acharya's main occupation or main duty when he establishes a sampradaya is to establish a certain rasa, a mood of awe and reverence, for example, mostly for Sri Sampradaya. And it is very unique in Brahma Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, where this mood of conjugal love and deeper understanding of Srimati Radharani is given. But even then, Sannivas Prabhu, historical understanding of our Sampradaya will tell you that up to the point of Madhavendra Puri, even this loving affairs of Radha, Rani and Krishna and the gopis were hardly there. In fact, Prabhupada writes extensively in Madhavendra Puri's pastimes in Chaitanya Charitamrita that Madhavendra Puri is actually the founding father of this conjugal mood. So in fact, the reason why, whether it is in South India or actually even why within our Sampradaya we are very respectful and careful, is because it's so easy to misunderstand the loving affairs that Radharani and the gopis had towards Krishna. We'll immediately put on the lenses of a boy-girl thing, and that will completely change the devotional landscape that we should be on when we offer devotional service to Krishna. So that is the reason why the acharyas have always been very careful. When Prabhupada uses the word confidential, he means that we must be qualified to understand these points. And sometimes, Prabhu, because of Kali Yuga, the message is lost through the sampradayas. And so you have patches of it in a little bit here in this sampradaya. Suddenly you hear of Radharani in a certain community, and yet in a large area you don't hear about her. Yet in some areas of India, Radharani is just spoken about in a very liberal fashion, without sastric understanding. And then, elements of we imitating the pastimes of gopis, these things come in. That's why better to be confidential so that our devotional service is not offensive than to be open when we are not ready to receive it. I hope that helps in a nutshell, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you very much. It cleared a lot of...
Thank you. Thank you, Amrish Prabhu, and thank you to all the devotees today. Very happy to have your association.
Thank you very much, Mr. Devakinandan Prabhuji. So to show the appreciation for Prabhuji, now we have to understand that Prabhuji is also celebrating Radharani there, and he is managing the programs in the entire Singapore region as well as the center that he is running. Still, he has found the time to share this transcendental wisdom about Srimati Radharani's appearance and pastime, as well as what we can learn from Srimati Radharani. So to show our appreciation for Prabhuji, let's chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra one more time, as loudly as possible, so that he can hear in Singapore.
Hare Krishna, Hare
I heard it. Very well.
Hare Krishna.
We'll be in touch, Amrish Prabhu. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
This is not the last lecture that we are hearing from you. We want to hear many more from you. Hare Krishna.
Very kind. Take care. Hare Krishna. With your permission, I take leave now. Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, you give me an order and we will organize. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.